Okay, so continuing with the questions, do you have concerns that generative AI might undermine the development of employees' critical skills in your industry?
Um, no, it's not really top of mind.
Hmm. Well,
No, please go ahead with what you're going to say.
okay. Do you think it would undermine students' abilities or no?
Yes, I do, because I think it's being used differently,
Hmm.
and and at a different part or a different point in a person's life when they're forming new skills. Not that not that an adult should never adjust their skills
Yes.
once they have formed them. They should always be, I think, reevaluating them and adjusting them as necessary. I mean, that's just part of, I don't know, Bayesian thinking. You operate differently when you get new information. So you shouldn't be kind of just stuck in the same ways all the time. So, but I think it's less, it's not really top of mind once a person managed to get through school and gets into work and they're using it as a tool versus maybe if it's in school, it might be used more as a crutch isn't probably the best term, but as a replacement for actually learning.
Yes. And are there any specific skills that you think might be weakened?
Um, for students,
Yes,
or
for students.
um, definitely, I think the creativity and ability to communicate. Um, just because it's being handed off to something else versus developing that part of your brain to do that or practicing it. You know, effective communication requires a lifetime of practice, and to stop it at a very early age, I think is detrimental.
I would agree. I have to keep practicing my communication skills.
It's it's hard because I think a lot of people don't realize that the burden of the audience understanding a topic is actually, well, the burden of that is on the communicator, not on the audience.
Yes.
That's why you have to be a really effective communicator. And sometimes if you want to use generative AI to help, but I often try to use it to say, okay, say the same thing I just said in 3 paragraphs in 3 sentences, because people's attention spans aren't 3 paragraphs long. They're 3 sentences long.
No, there, especially with TikToks and Instagram Reels.
Right, right. And so that's why it's important, I think, as students learn to communicate, and a lot of, I wouldn't say adults have all learned this, is to think in frameworks too. So what is the framework I'm applying as I am communicating? Like there are things like um, the big idea up front, or the big thing up front, or the pyramid principle, or the 80-20 rule, or things like that. Um, you start to develop those frameworks that not only help you communicate outwards, but I think also understand how others are communicating. And so by being overly reliant on ChatGPT to do all that, because you often aren't using ChatGPT to understand what someone just said to you or something like that. It will eventually be used. It could probably be used for that now because you can just listen into a conversation, ask it to summarize. But I mean, that isn't a day-to-day task that people do.
Yes, I would agree. And so you mentioned a lot of like generating of your works with AI. So one of the big questions that is currently being debated is how should AI generated content be assessed or credited in both like an academic and a professional setting?
That's a good one. Like, because there are concerns about copyright
Yeah,
infringement or the use of an author's work in an unauthorized fashion.
yes. And there's also
Um,
a lot of debate around intellectual property rights. It's a big legal debate right
right, right, because a lot of the you know material out on the internet you could almost consider as freeware. It's out there, it's open for anyone to use. Um, then there are materials on the internet by authors that say, hey, I'm publishing this out there, but it's not for use for something else, for commercial purposes or anything like that. We don't know where often the AI gets that information. And the fact that it is so, you can create a million books an hour, from AI, something like that. There's no way to check all that. Um, so I think citations and it's not so much reasoning, but just the method that was used to come to a conclusion need to be more transparent in the AI. And also to say that if something was generated by AI or a person or both, um,
now.
but I'll stop there to keep going with your questions.
Do you think that the content generated by the AI belongs to the user?
Like the user being the person who wrote the prompt.
Yes.
Huh, that's a good question. Um, no, not in its raw form, just back from GPT, but I don't. No, may not be quite right because sometimes it's based on the strength of the prompt. You know,
Strength
the you
prompt.
know the prompt itself might have been really complicated, proprietary, and therefore the answer as a reflection or a response to that prompt maybe. So I would say I'm probably more 80% no right now, but if they then use it in something else and augment it with their own capabilities and ideas, then I think it does become owned by them.
That's very close to what I think. And so, regarding this, what are some ethical considerations that are important when using AI in a professional context?
Using generative AI
Yes.
yes. So ethically, I think a lot of it, there's a lot that comes down and I'm going to say AI in general around privacy. Um, Generative AI, it's with, the content being, maybe under copyright or something like that. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that it's drawing ideas and material from and even likenesses of people and creating, so the first one is copyright. I think another one ethically is are fakes. So the generation of quotes attributed to people or videos, likenesses, pictures of a person that really isn't that person. I think that's uh, it's a big concern. And that part, the first part, probably has to do more with just our kind of ideas about property ownership, with copyright. The second one has to do often with misinformation and misattributing um, information to people. And so if I bucket them into those two things, I think those are the two big concerns I have right now. And I mean, you could even go kind of maybe a step above that and go to the fact that, not to get into the misinformation apocalypse, that is sometimes discussed, but so much of how we interact amongst each other and with our institutions and with our governments is based on trust. And with that accumulated misinformation and even targeted misinformation, it results in a lack of trust and therefore a collapse of institutions and potentially even governments, and the rise of those who would use power in, I guess, unsavory ways.
Very much unsavory ways.
I mean,
So,
when you think about it, some dictators have arisen strictly because there were like 2 to 3 years in a row of 25% unemployment.
yeah,
So and they created mistrust, created a problem, amplified the problem, and generative AI has that potential capability to increase that misinformation that would push a populace in that direction. And conceivably, there's the thoughts too that not so much generative AI, but AI in general could replace jobs.
yeah.
So it may create more jobs in one area, but remove jobs in another area. And since people aren't as mobile as software, you can't just pick up where you're living and your full family and everything and move to potentially get another job. It just creates that type of disruption that we're not good at handling.
There's a lot of economic debate because this, like, on one hand, it is removing job opportunities. On the other hand, that's kind of what our like m mode of economics enables. Capitalism enables like AI to take away jobs because it's based on, how do I explain this? We'll circle back to that. It is not relevant to the project.
What's something that might be useful if you haven't done this already is reading or listening to some of the materials by Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote the book Sapiens and Nexus.
Yes, my mom has that book. I read like half of it.
Yeah, his book Nexus is a lot more about AI.
Mhm.
And so he's had discussions with Mustafa Suleyman, who's the kind of the head of AI at Microsoft.
Oh,
And they're very interesting conversations about generative AI and its replacement. Well, just the effects of it. It's probably better if maybe I would I could tell you a little bit about how I've interpreted it, but if you listen to them explain it. It's very interesting because there are a lot of people like that. I think, what is it? George Hinton, Meredith Whittaker of AI Now, Mustafa Suleyman. I forget the name, ex-head of Google, but Yuval Noah Harari. Sam Harris, Steven Pinker. They all come at it from a slightly different angle. That is great to kind of listen to all of them and try to piece together what you think or what a person thinks of it based on their experiences. Um, but I think some of his stuff, Yuval Noah Harari and maybe Steven Pinker's material, who's the neuroscientist, is it MIT or Harvard? I can't remember. Is it Harvard?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. But he's a neuroscientist at I think it's Harvard. Um, they have very good, I think, rational and well thought out, explanations of what AI and generative AI are now and where they could be going, and the kind of like the dual purpose nature of it, the peril and the promise of them.
Hmm. The peril and the promise. That's a good way to put it
Yeah, it's
for the essay.
okay. Yes.
Okay, so moving on to a more positive, hopefully positive question. What do you see as the future of AI in your industry or in general?
Um, so I'll break it down into a few things also. So as in the industry I'm in, and I'll say, just for sake of simplification, like at Microsoft, it's as a producer of AI and as a consumer of AI. So as a producer of AI, I see Microsoft and other companies like them, the Facebook, Google, Amazon, just creating more and more purpose-built AI agents to solve more and more somewhat intractable problems that we have been dealing with. I think that's the bigger purpose future. I think there's always productivity. It helps with productivity, a digital assistant. But I think the future is producers of those technologies to help other companies solve these somewhat intractable problems that we have been faced with over time in terms of politics, energy, food, medicines, health, happiness. So using AI, that's the positive side, I think, of using it for that, and also somewhat being consumers of those technologies to help solve those intractable problems. Microsoft spends a lot of money on research. They've done a lot of great research in terms of safety and security, in particular. But if you consider those agents will make it possible for companies to actually achieve these new ideas and new technologies or accelerate those ideas and technologies that people have already had. I think that's the great promise that's out there that I think people are actually, honestly trying to achieve. The majority of people are honestly trying to achieve, and companies too.
Okay, that's a lot to take in, but every time I do an interview with an adult, I'm bombarded with a wall of info that I have to go back and look,
Okay.
search up. But it's very nice, actually. I enjoy it.
I am very happy to talk about this again. And if you have questions and say, what did you really mean by this? Send them an email or discuss. Happy to expand upon it because sometimes I don't even have the best formed idea. And so I may ramble a bit and come back with a different idea that I think is more well formed.
And
Recursive
that's
learning.
fair. That's
Recursive
fair.
learning. Let me put it that
Yes.
way.
At what age, we've talked about this a bit before, but at what age would AI start being beneficial?
So, like, let me put it like beneficial for a person to actually use. I think that's what you mean, versus the effect of AI on an individual.
Yeah, for
Right.
someone to be a user of AI.
Yeah, generative AI. That's a good question because I think you can use it in an entertainment fashion at an earlier age.
Let's
I would
focus
say
on maybe
uh,
just in an academic setting. Well, like,
academics. Okay. Oh gosh. Because I'm not an expert on this, so I may have to go ask ChatGPT. but I would think there's first the need to understand. So probably in at least middle school,
mhm,
to understand what it is, how it is used, because everyone's going to be exposed to it. So
yes,
I think you need to know what it is and how it's used, but not really to start using it until you're probably in high school, but in a more controlled fashion. Like if you had a class on using generative AI, so you knew how to use it correctly, just like you have like driver's training, things like that.
that's actually the more I'm doing this project, the more I'm like thinking that the product of this might be just an AI literacy class at my school because that's just what I've been getting from
Mm-hmm.
of these interviews.
Well, when you think about it, it's like things that I wish I had learned in high school that I didn't learn until much after even college. And sometimes that's good problem solving methods and frameworks, to distill down a lot of information into something quickly so you can make a decision or or just all the different ways you can approach a problem to solve it. And I think that AI literacy could also be about, you know, have as part of its, modules within its content is like problem solving or what to avoid, where to use it, where not to use it, how it can become addictive, all those types of things you might have to worry about. Probably wouldn't be bad to have for social media too, to be honest.
We definitely need some literacy classes for social media.
Yeah. It's like, how do you know what's true? People
Oh,
need
we
to have the
have
filter, understand how to filter for what's true
there's
and what's
this
not.
thing at UW every year called Miss Info Day. I went when I was in like eighth grade, I would say, like right before the rise of ChatGPT. So I'm like,
Uh,
I can tell Miss Info apart from like real info pretty easily. And then boom, that hope was smashed down. I wonder if they're still doing it. I should search it up.
well, misinformation, has accompanied information throughout history. It's just it can be, but you have to kind of look at it in a terms of like a signal to noise ratio. So, like I say, signal is correct or more truthful or objective and substantiated information and misinformation. And if that ratio is such that there's a lot of good information or substantiated and objective and little misinformation, you can discern it easily. But when that ratio changes, because it can be so easy to create fictions, and objective truth is hard to get at. It takes research. It comes from experts. It comes from journalists. It comes from institutions. That ratio will change, and people aren't the best filters for that because people like stories. And so they will tend towards the misinformation, the conspiracies. Um, so it's maybe that's part of the literacy part is just an understanding of human nature so people can understand, like you said, the misinformation, how to filter out misinformation. And that's why it would be good if AI, generated content was transparent. Is it generated or not? And what were the sources? And then how it was created? Probably still a lot of people wouldn't care because they live
Wouldn't.
in a
They don't
comfort.
wait to the end.
Yeah, they live in their own cocoon of information and confirmation bias. Um, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
So,
It is. So moving on to the next question, our last question.
okay.
What would you say would be the driving force that encourages a wider application and integration of AI tools in a professional setting?
What would be the driving force? Well, I think there are a few driving forces, but let me try to rank them. I think the driving force right now, at least in the companies that are producing AI, is the race to roll out, is to be first.
Hmm. Like the
Um,
space race.
right, exactly. It's like if I'm first, then I can capture the market.
Mhm.
Maybe more so than I have the best features or I'm the safest or something like that. It's just I'm first. You capture the market. That's just the way capitalism works. So I think that's a big driving force of a lot of the producers of AI right now. But every producer of AI is also a consumer of AI to an probably even a greater extent than maybe companies that don't produce it, and then also companies that do produce it. So I think what's going to drive them is they don't want to be outcompeted. Um, so they want to use AI in a fashion that's going to allow them to be more competitive. Um, and competitive encompasses a lot of things. It means your workforce being more productive, augmenting your workforce with digital assistants versus humans because you don't pay them or not don't pay them near as much. They don't require health benefits, all those types of things. Um, and then they're 24 by 7 and create creativity. So I think that's where a driving force for those consumers is just to be more competitive through
Mm.
productivity and creativity, and create new business lines through interpreting data in new ways. Um, there's a lot like to go to the point of, and maybe this isn't so much generative AI, but facial recognition data and sales data and all these types of things. There's so much data out there that I don't even think that the AI has even touched upon yet. That I think will be a kind of a new frontier for companies to branch out into to be more competitive.
That is actually the first kind of that answer I've gotten, which is very interesting.
Okay.
I've never gotten the competition side of it before. So I guess it was right to interview industry workers.
Okay. Good. It's yeah. Everyone does come with a different perspective. That's for certain.
Very
Yeah.
different perspective.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see.
Yeah. But everyone has. It's kind of like you think. Uh, all snowflakes are different.
Yeah, all
You know,
snowflakes are different.
but you need to pack them all together to make a snowball.
hmm This project is gonna be, oh, I don't know how big the size of this snowball is gonna be, but it's gonna be a snowball.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, but it's great that you're kind of in on the cusp of this to understand it, um, to understand how it affects you and your peers and
Especially because
others. Yeah.
I'm in high school, and a lot of the times high school is where you're starting to use the AI or
Hmm.
for me at least, be aware of how to critically use it. It's interesting to see because that's high school is the first time I've experienced the need for it because I'm doing mass amounts of research for projects and everything else, and sometimes
Yeah.
I just don't have the time to do or like read 26 scientific articles by myself.
Mm. Well, a lot of people don't really change how they think after high school. The ideas they formed at high school, they kind of stick with and think they last the next 20, 30 years or more out.
I would
And
say
so
my ideas change.
that's, I think, the newer way of learning. I hope it is that, as the world changes, the way you think is going to change, or the ideas you had in the past are going to change. That's where I think a lot of people aren't really good Bayesian thinkers. They learn something one way, but new information comes in that may contradict it, but they don't change their idea. Or even they don't even go to the point of, you know, thinking that they should think differently, let alone change any of their ideas. So, I think that's good you're looking at it now, so you know how to maybe continually fashioning or molding your way of thinking and what you want to learn in the future. So that's really impressive, Vivian.
Oh, thank you. It's the mass amounts of research. It does that to you. You're like, oh, do I even know anything? Who is it that said the only thing I know is that I do not know anything? That's
I don't
one
know.
Greek
It
philosophers.
sounds very Greek. You
Yeah,
know.
I'm thinking if it was Plato, but it doesn't sound very Platonic, so I will
Yeah,
have to search that up.
yeah, I know. But there are a lot of, I guess later on that was turned into the Dunning-Kruger curve.
Well,
So,
It it's like the Descartes quote. Everyone only takes cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. That's very
mhm,
fixed, but the full quote is dubito cogito ergo sum, which is I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. So
mhm.
to think is to doubt. You have to doubt your own thoughts in order to improve. That's how evolution works.
Right, right. Exactly. Like when people form ideas, very, it's very rare that people say, okay, how might I be wrong? And will I go actively search for information that could disprove the way I think?
Mhm.
1% of the population, or a very small percentage. I think probably people more in the more scientific community do that, but because that's how they test their hypotheses.
Yeah, that might be
Um,
why I'm in this way of thinking.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because you have the more analytical, scientific mindset, and where you realize that's necessary, probably even to be confident in your own ideas, is that you have tested them.
Confident, but also to doubt yourself. It needs to be a balance. You can't change your ideas with every new passing era that comes. Like you need to be sure of some things, but if
Mm-hmm.
you're too set in stone in your ideas, then you will not progress. Because I agree with Descartes, like if you're not doubting, then you're not really thinking because you think you know something.
Right, right. And that part about if you're too dogmatic and stuck in something applies to a person or even a government. So the difference between the United States and many other governments is its constitution was built so that it could be modified.
Yes.
It wasn't established on, well, this is the word of some deity, and therefore was is always right and could never change. Or it's the word of some king, and it's always right, it can never change. It was written such that it could change. It could be revised, amendments. And so it applies to a person or to, a governing institution. You have to doubt and test it and be willing for amendments. But to your point too, is you can't change every time the wind changes direction.
Yes.
You have to have some certitude.
You have a very nice way of putting things.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's like sometimes my thoughts are a jumble in my head and it comes out really eloquent, or the thoughts are really eloquent in my head and it comes out in a jumbled mess, and it's either one or the other.
That's true for me too. I mean, it's sometimes takes a while for the right words to surface and then come out, and then I'd say, I hope the other person understood that.
Oh, I'm
Um,
I'm understanding. So,
okay, good, 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 good. But you said that was the last question, but if you had other questions, I am more than happy to ask them or come back with clarifications or even review anything or be an editor in anything you've produced. I'd be more than
okay.
happy to help, Vivian.
Thank you so much. My mom is probably taking me to work soon because I offered to socialize with the lawyers for her so she doesn't have to socialize. I love socializing.
That is too funny. That's great. Well, you're great at it. I thought it was really nice meeting you that day at
It was so
lunchtime.
nice to meet
It
you.
was likewise, likewise. Well, I think I'm seeing your mom tomorrow morning too. We
Yeah.
have a meeting tomorrow morning, so I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Well, I'll let you go now.
Okay. Thank you, Vivian, for helping me think about this.